Hey guys, as part of my year of rereading for 2021, I'm going to be talking about Mouse by Art Spiegelman. Mouse is a graphic novel following author Art Spiegelman as he writes the story of his father's survival during the Holocaust. So, as I mentioned at the top of this video, Mouse by Art Spiegelman is part of my year of rereading for 2021, and you guys, hands down, this is perhaps my favorite graphic novel of all time. And I've read some pretty great, amazing graphic novels in the past, but I think I definitely still consider Mouse to be like the best and like just top tier when it comes to incredible just storytelling and narrative and whatnot for graphic novels. Yeah, the first time that I actually read Mouse was in college for a contemporary literature class, and I just remember when I was at the bookstore, you know, purchasing my books for that class, I was like, oh, this looks so good and just very, very different. I can't wait for us to get to this in class. And it was probably my favorite read of that semester for that class. And yeah, even at the end of the year, you know, you have the option to sell back your books and your textbooks, you know, but I was like, no way in hell am I selling this book back, because it just really left an impression on me. I really loved it, and just such a great story, you know, and a narrative that's heartbreaking but uplifting at the same time, you know. So yeah, I was like, I am definitely not selling this book back, because I would really love to, you know, re-experience this book sometime in the future and reread it. So yeah, I finally got around to a reread of this book, yeah guys, and I definitely was very glad I could re-experience this book and whatnot, because I fell right back in love with it, you know. As depressing as this book is, it's just still one of those books that kind of just really sticks with you and gets you thinking, you know. So yeah, as I mentioned, this is essentially a graphic novel, non-fiction, about the author, Art Spiegelman, who is telling the story of his father's survival during World War II and during the Holocaust and whatnot. And Art Spiegelman, he just does a remarkable job really portraying the war and the Holocaust in just such a brutal, raw, and honest way that I really respected. And he does all of this in just such a absolutely gripping way that leaves you just hooked page after page after page, and you're just so absorbed into what's going on. And this is definitely a rough read, you guys. It's not for the faint of heart. It's definitely very dark, full of despair. It can be rather depressing, I think. It is. It's very dark and brutal and raw, like I said, and honest in what it's saying and whatnot. And Art Spiegelman doesn't shy away from the subject matter. You know, he doesn't sugarcoat the war. He doesn't sugarcoat the Holocaust, you know. I think it would be just completely dishonest and disrespectful to do such a thing, you know. And he shows all of the stuff during the war and the terror and the horror and whatnot. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. He really does get into the nitty-gritty. And yet, even his father, the way he depicts his father in this book, he depicts his father, flaws and all. He depicts his father as not being a perfect human being. He doesn't sugarcoat his father either, which I really respected. So the story itself isn't pretty. It's a rough read. And yeah, the artwork as well, since this is a graphic novel, the artwork isn't pretty. And I kind of mean that, like, kind of literally and metaphorically as well, I think, if that makes sense. The artwork itself, I don't know how to describe the artwork. There's almost like this kind of frenzy to it, if that makes sense, and at times it almost seems like a child drew this. And I don't mean that in like a negative, horrible way or anything. I guess I can show you a few panels, just kind of a few panels here. There is something almost cartoonish about it, something rather childlike, but I really love that about the artwork. there's something still very compelling about it. I actually really quite love the simplicity of everything. And then in contrast with that, Art Spiegelman will have scenes like right here, I believe on this page, where characters are having to strip naked and they have to run around and whatnot. You know, you have there's also just a simplicity even to that, but there's something also still just greatly brutal and raw about it as well. And another thing about this book that I like, if you couldn't tell from the artwork, the characters are all depicted as being animals. The Jewish characters are mice, the Germans are cats, and yeah, there's other countries, like there's like the Poles and the Americans, I think the Swedish pop in at the end. Yeah, every country is depicted as some sort of animal, and I just really found that whole concept that Art Spiegelman uses in this novel, I just really found that whole concept to be quite brilliant and quite clever, and it really works, you know. It really extends kind of that metaphor, you know, the mice being chased by the cats, the Jews being chased by the Nazis, you know. The whole metaphor really works. And I think in general, this whole book, it's about life and death, obviously, but it's also about bravery and courage, and kind of contrast with that, you know, against the bravery and courage, it's also about survival, you know, and doing what you have to in order to survive, even if that means kind of looking the other way. You know, there may be someone in need over here, and you gotta look the other way in order to survive yourself or help your family survive or whatnot, you know. Characters in this book have to do things that they're not too happy about, that they feel guilt and shame about. And yeah, it's also a novel about a father and son at the end of the day as well. So getting into our two main characters in this novel, Art Spiegelman himself is a main character in this book. Like I said, this is a work of nonfiction. Even though it's told as a graphic novel, it's still a work of nonfiction. Art Spiegelman himself is a character, and his father, Vladek, is the other main character. And what is just really great about this novel, it can get very meta and very meta and very quickly. And I love that. I loved how meta this book was at time. You know, since Art Spiegelman, he is a character in this book, you know, he is the one writing this book. And a lot of this book, it's about Art as a character, his introspection, if you will. It's his introspection, who he is as a human being. It's an introspection of the fact that he is a child of Holocaust survivors. His mother and father managed to live through the Holocaust. It's about him being the child of Holocaust survivors. What does that mean? What does that do to him, you know, mentally, psychologically? A lot of the book is Art's kind of coming to terms with the fact that he will never understand what his parents went through during the Holocaust. He will never understand it. He will never understand true terror and true fear. He lives someplace where he lives comfortably. He has a roof over his head. He doesn't have to live day by day in fear. And yeah, he gets to eat every day. You know, he will never understand true hunger. He will never understand starvation. So Art, his journey as a character in this novel, it's a very interesting one. His just everything he's reflecting on and looking in upon himself and looking at his parents and what they had to struggle and survive with, and the things he doesn't have to deal with, you know, kind of the privilege he almost has, you know. And yeah, as a result, he feels a severe amount of guilt, a severe amount of shame. He also has a very strained and rather eccentric, estranged relationship with his father. And there's a lot of sequences in this novel where Art will go speak to his father Vladek, and you know, he's going there, you know, telling his father, hey, I really want to write a book about you and what you went through during the war and during the Holocaust, you know, and I want to interview you and get your stories. And yeah, Vladek is kind of up for that. You know, he doesn't want to re-experience some of those painful memories, obviously, but he's kind of willing to do it for the sake of his son, you know. And a lot of times during these interviews and these sessions that they have, yeah, Art and Vladek, they tend to just argue and bicker more than anything, and sometimes just over the most stupid of things, the most mundane of things. The thing is, though, it's like I love how that's presented in this novel, you know, because once again, Art Spiegelman doesn't sugarcoat anything, and he doesn't sugarcoat their relationship. You know, like I said, they have a very strained, eccentric, estranged relationship. It's not perfect by any means, and I love how that's depicted in here, because it really, there's something that it's like you can relate to that, you know. Anyone who has, you know, if you have family members or whatever, you know, people have relationships like this, you know, people can relate to this and understand it, you know. So I love how that's depicted in this. And much to Art's horror, you guys, he comes to realize that his father Vladek comes across as like the very stereotypical miserly Jew. And Art is just absolutely kind of horrified about that, because he doesn't want to perpetrate that stereotype, you know. He mentions that at one point in this novel. It's like, I don't want to kind of present my father as being the stereotypical miserly Jew, but I mean, that's how he really was, you know, and I don't want to hide that or cover it up, you know. I want to present my father, flaws and all, and that's how he was, you know. Because Vladek is a character, as you see him throughout this novel, especially, you know, in the, I guess it would be the present day, because I think the present day in this is what, the 70s, I think, the 1970s. You see Art's father Vladek, and Vladek, he is rather miserly. He is like that stereotypical portrayal with, you know, like I said, Art is absolutely horrified by that. Vladek, you constantly see him being obsessed about saving money and saving food and just saving miscellaneous items. And Art, he sits and questions and ponders throughout this entire novel, and he's talking to his wife as well, saying, hey, did the war do this to my father? You know, is it because of the war and because of what he struggled through? Is that why he is so obsessed with saving money and so obsessed with, you know, saving food? You know, don't throw food away, you know, because I had to starve, and I appreciate food. I'm never going to throw it away, you know. And yeah, he even just saves just some of the most stupidest of things, you know, because yeah, you see in the flashback sequences during the war, like saving cigarettes or saving toothpicks or saving a piece of rope or something, you know, that was valuable items and valuable commodities that could be traded at the concentration camps, you know. So yeah, Art is always wondering, you know, did the war do this to my father? And Art Spiegelman also doesn't hide the fact that his father did have some prejudice, because there is definitely a very, very awkward sequence in this book near the end where Art and his wife and his father Vladek, they go grocery shopping, and on the side of the road is a black man who is hitchhiking for a ride, and they give him a ride, but then Vladek the whole time is grumbling away like, oh, this man is going to steal our food and this and that. And Art and his wife are just absolutely horrified that Vladek is treating another human being like this, considering how he was treated by the Nazis and whatnot. How can he treat someone else like this? You know, how can he have racism and prejudice like this when he himself had to kind of go through something like that? But it's a very awkward scene in this book, but I think it was kind of much needed, you know, to really just see more of Vladek's character and kind of the type of person he was. So despite a lot of some of the more negative attributes of Vladek as a character, he is still a character that you can like, most certainly, you know. You sympathize with him, especially during the Holocaust chapters of this book. You can appreciate the fact that Vladek is very clever, very intelligent. He's very quick on his feet. He can kind of think very quickly through any given situation. He's good at knowing who to trust and who not to trust. And yeah, he has occasions every so often that, you know, his ability to kind of read people kind of leads him astray, and he gets himself in trouble on a few occasions. But in general, Vladek is depicted as, in those war chapters, he's depicted as being very smart and intelligent and quick to thought and quick to action where needed. And yeah, more than anything, he loves his family. He loves his wife. And that's another big part of this story, is definitely kind of the love story between Art's parents, Vladek, and his mother, Anya, I think is how her name is pronounced. And you do quickly find out in this novel that after the war, Art's mother did commit suicide at some point. And even in the flashback chapters, you do see his mother often very quick to despair and quick to depression. So yeah, the fact that she commits suicide later, you know, what Art is telling us, it's like it doesn't come as like a surprise or a shock, because you do see in the flashbacks that she was kind of prone to that nature anyway, and it's all very, very sad. And because his mother did do such a thing, Art himself he has his own set of psychological issues that he kind of shares briefly in certain segments of this book. And Vladek, you see another terrible aspect to his character, because Vladek, we are introduced in like the contemporary parts of this book that he does have a second wife who he treats very, very terribly, and often is sitting there saying, hey, you'll never compare to my first wife. My first wife was this and that, and you'll never be like her, you know. But once again, that's what I just really appreciated about what Art Spiegelman does with this book, how he depicts his father, you know, the good stuff, the bad stuff, you know, the stuff in between. It's all very, very well done. You know, he comes across as a very well-rounded character. So you guys, that's pretty much it for my thoughts and feelings on my reread of Maus by Art Spiegelman. I greatly enjoyed, I don't know if enjoyed is the right word, I don't really know what other word to use. It's like, how do you talk about Holocaust books, you know, because I often, when I talk about World War II and stuff, I'm like, oh, I really enjoyed this book, and it's like, I don't know if I should really be saying enjoyed, but you know what I mean. I'm glad I got to re-experience this book, because it's been a very, very long time, because yeah, the last time I did read it was way back in college and whatnot. And I really think Maus is a must-read when it comes to Holocaust nonfiction, if you will. I think it's right on up there with The Diary of Anne Frank and Night by Elie Wiesel. This can definitely stand easily alongside those works of nonfiction as well. And I think, yeah, generations to come definitely need to read this, you know, because I think the fact that this is done as a graphic novel, it makes it very accessible. You know, it makes it accessible to those who love graphic novels anyway. But even those who don't like graphic novels, I think those people will kind of get an appreciation for graphic novels, maybe through this book. And yeah, at the end of the day, even though this book is very depressing, you guys, it could be a rough read. It is very heartbreaking, but at the same time, there is something that's almost uplifting about it. And it's almost a love story. It's a love story in the flashback sequences between Vladek and his wife, but it's also a love story between this estranged son and his father and whatnot, and the two of them trying to understand each other, because despite all of the bickering and arguing that they do throughout the novel, they still love each other. You know, at the end of the day, they still love each other, because the war tore so many families apart. So many people died. So many families, whole families, were lost or killed and whatnot. And that's kind of the thing, that Art and his father, they at least have each other. You know, despite their estranged relationship, they still have each other. They still love each other. And it just makes this novel very beautiful at the end of the day, against all of the despair and depression presented. So you guys, that is it for my reread and my thoughts on Maus by Art Spiegelman. In the comments below, have you guys read Maus? Do you plan on reading it? Just let me know your thoughts down below. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.